you think mind is fundamental.
Singular. Yes,
I
I
believe it's
think that
primary.
mind is fundamental.
So you said something like every machine that we know of is intelligently designed, so it's okay to infer the machines of cells are intelligently designed. So I would
Absolutely.
like to ask, how come, since every mind that we know of is made of matter, how can you infer the opposite, that there are minds that aren't made of matter? Well, I joined the last stream because I heard I joined late, or I started listening late, so I came in like when you guys were talking about God as an explanation for things, and yeah, I just wanted to talk about how, like, unfalsifiable explanations, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting topic. I mean, I disagree with what was said there. I mean, Doubting Thomas was claiming that in order to make a sound um, argument, you need actually to make experiments and make predictions and then test these predictions. And if they pass through the test, then you can actually say that that claim is sound. And I disagree with that.
Well, that is the definition of soundness. You could have a valid argument where the premises are not sound, but soundness is just when the premises are true.
You can have case adequate or true premises which are related to what actually is observed in nature, and then you have a philosophical circle around it when you cannot test a certain inference, and then it's just the inference to the best explanation. And then it, of course, it is just abductive reasoning, but in regards of origins, that's all what we can do. We cannot test what happened in the past.
Well, the problem with unfalsifiable statements is it's just true by virtue of definition. Like, you could say anything. You could substitute any assertion there. And that's where, like, you can make a valid argument, but that's where soundness comes in, where soundness is where you have to be able to test each premise. The conclusion just says if, or the valid argument just says if the premises are true, then the conclusion follows. It doesn't care whether the premises are true or not.
Well, let's just relate to what was said at Speed's channel, where I was questioned about the syllogism that they use about cell factories. So I would say that if the premise is true, if cells are indeed factories, and then the second point, that factories are always only observed to come from an intelligent cause, then the conclusion follows logically and is a sound argument. Then cells are best explained through the action of an intelligent agent which instantiated them.
No, I think that is categorizing something as designed in order to conclude that it's designed.
That was the criticism actually made, that the premise was a circular argument, that it already included the conclusion.
Yeah, so it's just it's begging the question because you're defining it in a category and not actually citing like traits of the actual thing. And I don't think you can even necessarily conclude design just from physical facts. I think you have to know the intentions or the process that created it.
Well, what actually Donald brought up as a syllogism, which I was making, was not actually the actual syllogism, which is the form that I'm using right now. And since you said, well, in the premise you have actually to describe a thing, I am doing that in a quite detailed manner. And if you want, I can actually read here the syllogism in the form that it has right now, and if you want, you can criticize it.
Well, my main criticism that I came to do is to criticize the explanation that God did it. Like you're saying, oh, we have to go with the best explanation, but I don't. But God doing something is not. I'm gonna argue it's not even an explanation.
Why not?
So it has no mechanism. It has no applications, and it can fit any set of data. So it can't be a model or a theory, and it explains nothing because it can explain everything. It actually explains nothing.
Yeah,
It
that
has
is a
nothing to do with real
criticism.
life.
It's
Yeah, this is a
unfalsifiable.
criticism. This
That's
is
what
a
I was stating
criticism
earlier.
which I've heard several times in the last few days now. And I don't know if you have heard my answer to that. If not, I can repeat it here.
I haven't. I don't think. No. Go ahead.
I haven't.
Okay, so I agree that, first of all, the origin of life cannot be recreated because it is an event which happened in the past. So, whatever explanation that we come up with, it is not an explanation as a result of a test in the laboratory. Even if we would be able to recreate life in the laboratory today, that would not say in regards of how it happened in the past, how actually life was instantiated and started all life being, which we see today.
But it would give
It,
us a plausible
it
idea
would be
and a
one
natural
step. It
mechanism.
would be one step. Yeah. It would
So
be one
that
step closer.
Yeah, so that's precisely my point. All that we can do is actually investigate how life operates. And then from that evidence, we can make inferences to what best explains its origin. And it doesn't require necessarily that we can test the mechanism.
But the fact that one explanation can be substituted for any result, that doesn't. It's not an explanation.
Well, I see the same happening, and I would have asked today, Dimitri, but since it was such a crowded place at Speed's channel, so I didn't have the opportunity, but I will ask him this question at another opportunity, because whenever I have brought up some sort of observation, then his standard answer is always, oh, because evolution, that's the alternative, that's my explanation. So basically everything that I bring up, he explains it with evolution. So I was going to ask him, so can you give me some sort of thing that you would say evolution can't do? And I will ask him that. So maybe you can answer the same question, Snake.
Which question?
Well, it seems to me basically that evolution is a capable mechanism for any kind of complexity.
Oh, okay, right.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter
So-
how complex it is, and it's an explanation in regards of the origin of the complex machines that we see, the proteins, in regards of the information transmission mechanisms, basically everything that we see in life.
So it would be equally fallacious to say take natural processes or just take naturalism in general and say nature can produce everything that we see and just define it as nature has that capability and then use that as a premise. It would be equally as fallacious to say God can create everything we see, because neither of those are actually explanations and both of them fail. And so the problem is, if we go with God, then you're allowing us to just say, well, it was just evolution. But this is where methodological naturalism comes in, where evolution has explained how things can naturally get more complex. So this is a better starting point and something we can actually study versus we can't even go further with the God explanation. We have no idea how it happened. We don't have a mechanism. It doesn't have any applications or predictions, and it fits any data set. So that's where falsification comes in, there are ways to falsify evolution in general or in a specific instance, and so that means that it can't fit any data set. The problem with things that are unfalsifiable is they fit all data sets, so there's no way to tell the difference between the fact that it's actually happening and something else causing it.
So I also asked Dimitar when he would say this is the threshold where we cannot say that evolution or whatever isn't a good explanation anymore, and here eventually starts design as a better explanation. He said, well, we will try out everything in our capabilities and to find natural explanations to the phenomena which we are investigating. But I mean, you need to draw a limit. Where is the limit of evolution or natural mechanisms? And where does intelligent design start to be a better explanation of what we see in the real world?
Who needs to?
We all need, because we want to find out the truth. We want to know how things actually happened.
Why do you need to draw that line there where you just drew it, though?
Well, because we have this dichotomy. Either there is a God which instantiated it all, or there was no God and no creator actually instantiated everything that exists.
What is a God in real life?
Well, I describe God as an intelligent, conscient, super powerful, eternal creator.
I did say real life, didn't I?
Yeah,
What does that have to do with real life?
How would I know, Otangelo, the difference between the two things you just said?
That is a good question. And I think we can actually draw that line by investigating and establishing what are the signs of intelligent action, which non-intelligent action is not capable of producing or doing.
Making human computers, making human buildings, making human things at all.
I agree, but I still don't know.
I think that
where does mind come from in your view, Otangelo?
In my view, mind is fundamental. It comes prior and before the physical things like matter, space, and time.
Okay, so that still doesn't explain where did matter come from? Where did the cell come from? You say there has to be a mind, right?
Yeah.
There's an intelligent designer to this, right?
Yes.
Is his mind made of cells?
No, I describe a mind as a not physical.
Then where did it come from, right? If it's not physical.
Yeah, it is. We have to ask, why is there actually something rather than nothing?
No, a better question for me to you is, so where did the cell come from then? Out of God's mind? Is that what your claim is? That's where the first cell came from? That's your definition of abiogenesis?
Well, I believe that
the first cell came from a mind, is what I'm trying to say.
I believe that God instantiated the universe, all conditions to have a planet which can host life, and then used the physical elements in order to make life. Yes.
So how did God go from the non-physical to the physical? How did that happen?
Guys, I will let you talk. I have to do some things here, and I'll come back a little bit later. Is that okay?
All right.
I'm sorry, my wife just called me out. I've spent too much time here on the live chat. I don't know how much time I will take here. But I'll comment and say if it will take longer or shorter period. Okay. Just give me 2 minutes, and I'll just respond to you.
No, take your time.
Well, so think there's a problem in saying, and back me up if you agree, if there's a problem with saying mind is fundamental. What was he just saying? My train of thought.
I don't know.
I'm gonna try and work out my train of thought while he's gone, but
Well, that's what I was getting at. If mind is fundamental, then what is the first mind made of? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know.
yeah,
It seems like you're smuggling something in there somewhere.
yeah, that's where my train of thought was going. I have to.
If God's mind can somehow have existed without cells.
Okay,
then
guys, my daughter
oh,
has high fever, and I have to stay with her. So, unfortunately, I cannot continue, but I can let the stream open, and you guys can continue, and maybe I can join later.
Okay.
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 All right. Good luck.
Sorry about
All
your
right, thanks.
daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Take care
thanks.
of your daughter.
All right.
So why does people think there can be a mind without physical something like to work off or to get the mind from?
Exactly. That's kind of my question. Yeah. How does that?
Computers even have a mind of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, he was saying every known factory or machine is made by humans, or by an intelligence at least. And so, but to use his argument, so every mind that we know of is actually made of matter. So how can he conclude that mind is fundamental?
Why does he even think of a mind do something in the first place? I mean,
I think I see what you're saying.
And every mind is made up of processes. Like they just think of mind as like this holistic thing that isn't divisible into anything, but that's contrary to everything we know about minds.
they think it's like in a different dimension that we're like going through into these bodies or something. Somehow.
Right. Right.
Well, the soul,
I don't get it either. Yeah, the soul, but how it just.
But
it doesn't seem to fit somehow logically, and
No.
I can't quite put my foot down on it. But it doesn't make sense to me.
And
there's no evidence from reality. That's where I'm saying that they're just making it up. So.
Yeah, sort of.
And I've never heard a good explanation of what the brain actually does. Like some people say, oh, it's a receiver for the soul. Okay, so, but why couldn't the soul just directly control the body? Like you know, like why can't the body just be a puppet for the soul? And like why? So, but why would feedback damage to the brain or drugs to the brain? Why would that affect my perception as a soul? Like how is my soul getting drunk?
It matters where you live, what you learn too. Like if you believe in different religions or something in a different environment.
Yeah. Like
so why does that matter if you to mess up with your soul? I mean, the imaginary version, because soul just is an emotions in real life.
Yeah, like I could see getting drunk or something would interrupt your ability to control your body, but how would that cause change in thoughts? You know, because if the mental is happening in the soul, I could see if the brain was just a receiver that certain things could interrupt that connection, but I couldn't see how the drugs could upload into the soul and change the perceptions. It would just kind of, you would feel like you're not in control of your body, but your thoughts would be the same.
It's like from John Maddox, he says that we can still be affected by their brain, but the soul is still its own thing. I don't know.
Yeah, but they never explain it, so.
Yeah.
To what extent and how it works, it doesn't matter. And that's the whole problem with using those as explanations, is they can just come up with anything.
Well, religion reverses everything, so.
Yeah. Start with the conclusion. And that's kind of what I'm leaning towards, like with especially abio conversations. Like, I'm not as interested in the science. Like, personally, I am interested in the science, but with the conversations, it's like, with the creationists, it should be more about the process of how you get to this conclusion in the first place, because we could argue all day about the explanations and the mechanisms, but if you're just going to start with the conclusion and work backwards, it doesn't matter how much science we have. You're always going to be able to fit your explanation to a different set of, or fit a different explanation to the same set of data. So I think the epistemological process is actually more important, but it is fun when you catch them not knowing the science either.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're just gonna all agree at this point.
Yeah. For me, it's like only science is like 20% of what I do.
What's the other 80?
Entertainment.
Yeah. Well, sometimes they cross over.
Yep. See,
I'm entertained by all the sciences except for math. Math is just always a slog for me.
I haven't got to watching the new episodes of Nova yet. I'm about to. It's on their site for free.
What's the topic?
Beyond the Elements. And then this episode with reactions. That might
Is that like how
help
the cosmic, or like how the cosmos created higher elements and stuff? Like fusion and stars?
I don't know yet.
Alright.
I haven't watched it yet, so.
Oh, are we
They
still
have
live on his channel?
4 episodes. Yep. And they have 4 episodes that are new. Or coming up, actually. 2 more episodes. So it's 2 episodes out that are new. That I haven't watched.
Oh, they're all free?
Just the later ones.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Yeah, I used to watch that a lot, but then I haven't paid for TV in a while.
This is free, so
Nice.
try to do everything where I can find it for free.
Yeah. I'll have to check it out.
You can see it better. Hope these are going to be good episodes. Well, Nova is always good episodes.
Yeah.
Because it's real scientists doing it, so.
Yeah, it's always funny when people are just disagreeing with the science. And then they call us arrogant because we don't want to obey their religion.
Yeah.
Is there a live chat going? I wonder if anyone's complaining.
Just mostly George Bond, looks like.
Yep. He asks if your brain is intelligently designed.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we could address. He asks, how does nature design, and does it have forward thinking? If you consider humans part of nature, then we have forward thinking. But I think the spirit of the question is more about non-intelligent processes. So, I mean, that's easy. We can observe how nature designs things, both in mutations, and we can simulate it. Basically, I mean, I'm sure everyone's heard the explanation 1,000 times, but it's just mutation or permutation and then selection. It's just there are changes to the existing order, and then the ones that work stick around and proliferate. And we can see that that's how we create the most complex AIs. Is they actually just kind of let them mutate, and then they select which ones are working the best. And like even the researchers don't understand what the computer program is actually doing. It just works because it is random, but it ends up working. It ends up creating new functions. So, I mean, it's just observable stuff.
Just think of how tiny it is, and then how the littlest things can cause big changes, like the chemicals that can connect together and everything.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the points of that paper trails they just did was most of the biological functions are not finely tuned. They actually have lots of different functions, and it's just dependent on pretty much what chemicals are next to it.
Yeah. Kind of like a filter that Otangelo was trying to look for.
Yeah. And that's how things evolve, because you have a starting function, and then one small change could give it a completely different function, or a slightly improved function, or two functions. And that's how it works. That's how things become like dependent on each other, or irreducibly complex, because it wasn't a gradual. Like, gradualism is often misunderstood as kind of like if you're drawing something or like building Legos, like you just start gradually and go up, and you have the basic structure, and you just make everything the same but just a little more finely tuned. But that's not how actual evolution works. It repurposes things entirely.
Yeah, it's like randomly putting Legos together and breaking them down sometimes, and then it's confusing. It's all over the place.
Well,
but it's the ones that survive that are the ones that reproduce.
Yeah, and actually, that reminds me of how some of my later Lego projects were done, because I had years and years of Legos like that I would put together based on the directions, and then they'd get put in a box, and some pieces would fly off and get broken off, and then I could make these new creations repurposing old parts for completely different things. Obviously, I'm still intelligently designing them, but
it's kind of hard to do when we're intelligent, and then trying to show what things are natural, but we're already trying to guide it into that. So then it's like a weird thing. That's why we have to try to do lab experiments.
Yep.
That are, but then that's still but it's using nature. It's confusing.
Yeah.
It's letting it do its own thing somewhat.
Yeah. But even
like slime molds and stuff.
Yeah. But even then, like, if I'm just picking up random parts out of my Lego bin, I didn't set out to go looking for this one piece of this one ship that I'm going to put on this other thing. Like, it just kind of occurs to me. Like, I see it, and I realize that it could go there. And it's not so much that I went looking and designing for it. And if nature is just randomly putting things together, eventually it's going to put two and two together just the same as I did. It's just that intelligences are able to kind of skip through some of the failed or nonsensical confirmations a lot quicker. In some instances, computers can do it a lot quicker than we can, but Yeah, they try everything. Nature will try everything, and then whatever works sticks.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of something a lot of people don't have an intuitive understanding of. That, or they just really are motivated to prove their religion somehow.
Yeah.
What else do we got in the live chat? Answering a question with another question. Try again. How did nature design an epigenetic process to adapt to future well, I think he means scenarios. Nature doesn't care. Yeah, nature doesn't care. Nature will try everything. It'll throw everything at the wall, and whatever sticks, sticks.
How about this program where you can make testing, we call it, different models, and then see what survives, or what's the best. It says to evolve, and then it goes through a whole bunch of different scenarios. And this is the main one is the one that in front. I guess I did it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of evolution simulators, and it's obviously not based on like one-to-one chemistry, but these same processes can create new parts, new functions that were not ever programmed or designed into the thing by any intelligence. It's just using the existing frameworks to create new parts, just like Legos. Like, there are Legos there, but the program will put them together in unique ways that weren't ever designed by an intelligence, because the program tries every confirmation.
Oop. Yeah. Try to get a better version. There we go. Well, that didn't make it move. Have to make it a little offset to make it have motion. Oh, that just collapses.
And as long as those things can be changed, they will change.
Oops. There's another joint that doesn't need to be there. Yeah, there.
Hate Love Nothing says, why would anything be done but you need materials? Isn't there a material in the world, and don't they just interact with each other on their own?
I think I'm doing something wrong.
But like Demeter was saying, like, the biggest hurdle is just to get Darwinian evolution going. And the biggest part of that is replication. Once you get that, then we know for a fact that things can self-improve.
Well, I'm getting somewhere with this one, but it's messy.
Yeah. See, but the one factor not in the simulation is just, well, it is technically, it's just kind of the replication is every time you redesign a new one, you're just kind of assuming a replication.
What do you mean?
Like, in the process of evolution, replication is very important. So, but that's the biggest hurdle. We don't know how replication got started in the natural world. At least of complex cells. Like, we know of parts of the cells that can self-replicate or produce by natural processes. Because that's the other thing. Like, people ignore just constant production from the environment. You don't need it. You don't, like prebiotically, you don't need everything to be self-replicated inside of a cell if it's just being produced by the environment. And that's reflected in modern life, where we don't self-replicate everything. We have to get certain fuels and materials from the environment just to self-replicate.
Yeah, the tiny stuff does easier because it's like how we get oxygen all the time because things are moving around, and just like all the chemicals and stuff that would build our body and stuff that feed the ribosome that puts the chemicals together to make proteins that we get from our food and stuff. It all moves around in our body.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have those certain chemicals, then our bodies start breaking down.
Yeah. I'm looking for this one evolution simulator that I really like. Oh, here it is. Have you seen the Carl Sims one?
I don't think so.
Let me... I can share it. Well, did Otangelo give us screen sharing?
He
I
has
guess,
to
yeah, you're doing
do
it
it himself. I'm using OBS.
Ah. Okay, well, look up Carl Sims evolved virtual creatures. That's probably my favorite one.
What was it again?
Carl Sims evolved virtual creatures. I like that we're just preaching evolution on Otangelo's channel without any pushback.
What's wrong with seeing simulations? How that evolution in real life?
Yeah.
It's just an idea of things happening and change over time. That was all that we're looking at. Doesn't mean that we're looking at the biological things, but even though that can happen in real life, that change over time. So
yeah, it's just
hard to.
It's just proof of concept
clear.
that if you have those
Yeah.
those elements of replication, change, and selection, then things can self-improve. Like the statement that nature cannot design new functional structures is just false, because those are processes in nature.
So what am I supposed to be doing at the site?
Oh, that YouTube video is what is the best one.
Okay. Can barely see it.
Yeah.
See, how do I center it better? It's the best I can get.
I can't hear any audio.
Oh, whoops.
Simulated physical environments. Swimming speed was used to determine survival. Most of the creatures are results from independent evolutions. Some developed strategies similar to those in real life. Once they're evolved, multiple copies of these creatures can be made and simulated together in the same environment. The next group of creatures were evolved for their ability to move on a simulated land environment with gravity and friction. Some simple solutions with just two parts were found. Some seemed like they could use some assistance, while others were fairly efficient, such as this rowing-like behavior. Here is an odd cousin of the previous. A mutation caused him to tumble. Some creatures evolved to incorporate contact sensors in their control systems. Here is another inchworm-like creature that tends to go in circles. This was actually a creature first evolved for its ability to swim in water, then later put on land and evolved further. A successful sidewinding ability resulted. Here is one with a hopping style. The protrusions on its arms seemed to help prevent it from tipping over. This was the fastest, with a successful galloping-like stride. This group was evolved for their jumping ability.
So how do these get evolved in the simulation?
Yeah, all the programmers' design was the ability to stick blocks together and for them to move. And then everything else was just randomized, and they came up with these highly ordered structures that were very functional.
Did we have a goal or something? And we're just picking out these things like artificial selection?
Well, the selection was like swimming or walking speed.
Oh. So it's not nature in that sense.
Well, I mean, nature would be able to select for traits like that, but it was arbitrarily determined.
They all can survive in a computer program.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's not nature selecting naturally. We have a goal. We have like a forethought. That's what the creationists think when we do these simulations, I think.
Yeah,
that's the hard distinction.
Yeah, they're always going to be like, well, you picked that as your end goal. And it's like, well, nature could also select for those same traits, though.
Yeah. Because nature can do stuff by itself just fine. That's what we have, and that's what we look at in real life all the time.
Yeah.
Outside our cities and homes that we think or only stay in, because especially COVID and stuff. We don't see the real world too much anyway, unless you're looking through all the internet and stuff, looking at science.
Yeah. Dan Straight says, because life is totally analogous to blocks sticking together. It's analogous to total anatomy. It's analogous to muscles and bone structure. So, yeah. This isn't like proof of abiogenesis, but it's proving the concept of evolution can create new body plans without any design or intelligent design. Hate Love Nothing says they speak of nature as if it has intelligence, and I don't see how you're getting that at all. What nature does and what this program is simulating is just replication and change. So the program will go through thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of different changes to blocks that stick together and move. And some of them have functions for moving the entire structure. That's it. There's no intelligence involved other than setting up this process, which is not what we're looking at. We're looking at what happens after the process is set up.
Yeah, I was trying to make it clear that, of course, the computer simulations are have objectives and stuff to the people that are in the chat, or the people out in the audience or whatever, that are still not understanding how us humans are trying to understand things.
Yeah, what it's testing is just if randomized structures can end up at functional structures and new structures, and they can. And there is a way to separate out all of the duds from the ones that we'd be interested in, and that's selection. And of course, we choose which selection vector we're going to look at, but that's just because as scientists, we have to look at certain variables. And then later in the video, there's even ones that can fight each other.
Oop, that's all my writing. I write a whole bunch. You ever see?
Yeah.
These are my thoughts.
Looks familiar.
Let's go back here.
This group was evolved for their ability to adaptively follow a red light source. The resulting creatures are now being interacted with. A user is moving the light source around as the creature behaves. This one seems to flail randomly, but somehow still manages to approach the light. Perhaps it is mean to move the goal away just as it arrives. Here is one that has propeller-like fins which are tilted depending on the direction of the light. It can adaptively swim up or down very well. This final group of creatures was evolved for their ability to compete for control of a green cube. The creature closest to the cube at the end of a simulation is the winner. Here, a strategy first arose for simply tumbling towards the cube. Then one learned to block out his opponent. But then later, one learned to overcome the obstacle by climbing over it. Some pinned down their opponents.
Accidentally, maybe.
Some covered the cube with protective arms. Others simply unfolded onto the cube. The success of a strategy is often highly dependent on the opponent. Here is a hockey-playing creature, which takes the cube away and wins by a large margin. Here are two similar hockey strategies battling it out, with appropriate gestures.
And they're just flailing around, just our analogy, because they're hitting each other
This
accidentally.
crab-like creature walks well, but often continues past the cube and instead seems to prefer beating up on his opponent.
But we're just trying to turn around and it's just running into it.
Against the arm, the crab seems to simply walk away.
Could have been a
A
glitch.
successful strategy is this two-arm technique that swipes quickly in from the side and moves the cube over to a second arm. These are the final rounds of competition amongst the overall best. Finally, the seeker arm goes against the side swiper, but the cube is just out of reach.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point where success is highly dependent on the opponent, where there's not like some true level of fitness, where there are conformations that are really successful against certain environments and then really unsuccessful against other environments. That's another thing they don't seem to understand. And then
and nature can program by having the ones that survive that reproduce, of course. They can have those traits that do that because they survived in that scenario. That's another thing.
And someone said it would be interesting if the program was randomly created. Dan Straight. And I said earlier, there are programs that are randomly created by this same process, but just not this one. And on principle, it probably could be randomly created. It would just take so long, and there would be no way to filter out all the billions of programs. Oh, Otangelo's back.
There's two Otangelos.
Yeah, I'm on my cell phone. Yeah, I will remove my other account and I can follow you guys on the cell phone.
He's replicating.
Yeah.
Ok. Já tô indo. Larissa, pode vir. Pode vir, filha. Você vai ficar com a vovó, é?
So are you able to rejoin us?
Yeah, I will rejoin you guys. Just a moment.
Cool. Yeah, we could go back to that the mind is fundamental thing.
Yep.
Let's see, what else? Dan Straight, let's start randomly changing your DNA and see how you do. Well, the thing is, we've actually tested that, and that actually does... It doesn't work on a single individual, which is why, like, fictional media like X-Men doesn't make sense. But we have tested...
It's epigenetics.
Yeah. But we have tested random mutations on lots of things, and they end up improving their fitness.
It's a population thing.
Yeah. And if you need specific examples, I'll do that. Lenski, I'm sure. But all the creationists say, well, they lost information. But they also gained information at the same time. They forget that.
And that loss can change into something else, too.
Yeah, that's one of the explanations for irreducible complexity, where if you can build up a scaffold, you can build a bridge over that, a bridge which you couldn't build individually and couldn't be reduced to those individual parts, but they can be sequentially put on if the scaffold is there. But then if you take away the scaffold after the structure is completed, it's no longer dependent on the scaffold. It can lose the scaffold and still retain its structure. But if it has no scaffold anymore and you take out any individual part, it will collapse. But it won't if you have the scaffold. And that's actually what happens a lot in biology, and that's how dependencies evolve, where you'd have a protein that stabilizes something, another protein comes in and does something else, and then you can lose lose the original protein then.
Well, the thing here, Snake, is that we have, for example, metabolic pathways where you require several enzymes lined up, and each enzymes processes the product of the previous enzyme, and that goes on for like 7 steps, like in the chlorophyll biosynthesis pathway. And you need all the enzymes there in order to have the final product, which is the chlorophyll fully assembled. And these intermediate products, they are actually toxic to the cell because they generate a reactive oxygen species which would kill the cell. So there have to be, right from the beginning, mechanisms which actually protect the cell from these reactive oxygen species in order to not toxify the cell. And I don't see how mutations would produce an enzyme which would produce a subproduct which by itself has no function, but actually would toxify the cell. And we are talking not just about one protein or enzyme, but several, like the 7 which I mentioned. Now, the total pathway is 17 enzymes long, and 10 enzymes are also used in the making of blood cells, hemoglobin. But the last 7 enzymes, they are uniquely known to be just used in that biosynthesis pathway. So claiming that somehow evolution would have produced these enzymes when the product of each of those, which is an intermediate product, would be toxic to the cell, that is, in my understanding, not going to happen.
But the thing is that we have observed things like that evolving. And I think one of the things you don't understand...
That's not true.
Yeah, it is. I'll get to that.
It's not true. I'd like you to show me your evidence for that statement.
I'll get to it.
Right here.
So
Absolutely.
the problem with your understanding, Otangelo, I think, is you're looking at this process evolving towards just the modern form Whereas when it would have evolved, it would have been completely different. So I'm trying to explain.
No, let's suppose that you have the evolution of such a biosynthesis pathway. Okay, so let's suppose that you are going through the first 10 steps, which are also shared by the biosynthesis of hemoglobin. And then from the 10th step, you have to go to the 17th step in order to have a functional chlorophyll molecule. So you have in that pathway 7 enzymes which you have to make de novo through some kind of process or mechanism.
But that's the modern form of it.
Well, the thing
That's
is
like
that
saying,
we do not
that's
know.
like saying, how do you get a bridge just by stacking bricks on top of each other? Well, there's other things that you're ignoring in its
For
construction.
example,
The scaffold that
So-
holds it up.
I'd like to ask real quick because you remember you said just a little while ago that you were comparing, irreducible complexity to having a scaffolding structure, and then I'm not seeing where there's a comparison here. I mean, a scaffold would of course only be there in the event that we are trying to build towards something, right? But in biological systems, there's not something they're building toward. You understand that, right? Natural selection has nothing to do with building towards something.
Yeah, but
right?
but things can function
random.
as
You're not
stabilizers.
thinking about this logically. No, there's no such thing like this in biology until we have enzymes already in place. Don't you understand that?
Well,
It's modernly.
yeah. So there is no end goal. That's the whole point. That's why things can come in
No,
and
you-
it can
you wanna
evolve
understand
That's the
dependencies.
problem.
enzymes
So,
go
for
through and
example-
correct the problems in the genome structure,
No,
right?
So
But without the enzymes there, they cannot do such things, right? But what you were trying to say is that there is already basically something similar to a scaffolding structure within biology that allows irreducible complexity to be completely thrown out the window, which is a lie.
yeah, but when you're
I've
looking
never
at the
seen a single
modern,
thing that's even comparable.
when you're looking at the modern current outcome, you're missing pieces of the puzzle that aren't even there anymore that could have provided stability earlier. And so
And
here's
you know
an
this
example.
how?
Here's an example. There's a species of amoeba that was getting infected by bacteria that would kill them. Some of the amoeba had genetic
why
changes
don't
to
we
them.
just
Hold
say
on.
we-
Some of the
I'm
amoeba
listening.
had genetic changes, and the bacteria had genetic changes to them, where the bacteria were not destroyed in the amoeba, and the amoeba did not get sick when the bacteria was not destroyed. And then,
What does that have to do?
hold on,
Okay, wait a
I'm
second.
not
So
done
if there's
yet.
a mutation
But I'm not
here,
done yet.
Okay.
So, and then there is a subspecies of this amoeba that if the bacteria are removed from them, they will die. So they're entirely dependent on those bacteria. And yet the species they came from kill the bacteria that go into them, and they survive without those bacteria. So they are now dependent on this other thing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. You're talking about a symbiotic relationship of some type that's been developed apparently in a lab. But regardless of that, even if that were potentially true, right, which I haven't seen the paperwork on what you're talking about there, I'd have to see it myself. But just to clarify, this has nothing to do with irreducible complexity at all.
But that is
You're trying to say no,
those
it's
amoeba are
not.
irreducibly
Obviously-
complex. You can't take the bacteria out of them.
We're talking about structures that are at the most basic of the basic here, right? Like, so whenever like Dr. B, he talks about the flagellum, right? How important it is to bacteria to even moving around, because it's like they would basically have to be going through the most viscous fluid you can imagine, like peanut butter or something like that, right? That's essentially what they're having to do every single time that they move around, right? So whenever they have a flagellum in motion, they have to be able to, rotate that at a certain RPM, and it has to already be fully functional with certain distinct pieces already in place. Without those pieces there, it doesn't function at all. That's the whole
Yeah,
point,
but
right?
biological
But you're saying
systems-
somehow this was there was a scaffolding system that apparently allowed this to progress up to a flagellum, which makes no sense because there's no precursory, structures that even potentially go that way.
But you're ignoring that biological systems
Okay.
have redundancies. So cells do not need flagella to move around.
Okay, I'm.
So they can.
I
They
have
can
no idea where
have-
you're trying to get that.
they
So
can
how are they
have-
going to survive if they can't move around to get food?
I just said that they have other ways of moving around. So they could have evolved flagella.
I mean, they could accidentally.
They could have evolved flagella.
They could accidentally
while,
be in motion while something else is moving them.
No.
That's not the same thing.
No, they can
but the point
change
is,
their shape.
how can they hunt down their food? Because that's what the majority of them do. They will eat other bacteriums or similar structures. So that the point I'm trying to get across is, how would they be able to survive long enough to get that done?
So cells can
But you're saying
around,
that that's not required.
If a cell can move around without flagella, they can evolve surface proteins that can spin around and do flagella-like things while still being able to move around. And then once they have functional flagella, they're free to lose that original form
I've never
of
seen
locomotion.
I've never seen a paper that's shown anything that's similar to the structure of flagellum and how it's able to allow bacteria to flow through these viscous fluids. I don't understand where you're getting that from.
There's a lot of precursors to flagella that have rotational capability, and once you have that, really all it is I think it's microtubules, and that's the other way that cells get around, is by extending microtubules in a certain direction and then retracting them in the opposite direction.
Again, I'm not seeing any comparison here. So you're saying that something that was supposedly a precursor, which isn't even the same thing as a flagellum, doesn't have the same capabilities, obviously, right? It would have to be very limited, if at all, right?
Well,
it somehow had the ability to move it around. No, we're talking about something that can move at like 100,000 RPM, like per second. That's how fast the flagellum moves. That's what allows it to move through this viscous fluids. It's insane to think about. We can't even make a motor that's that efficient today. So think about that.
Of course,
we have structures that are already from the beginning that are more advanced than anything we've developed today.
Yeah,
in the most basic life form.
At the atomic level, there's like very little friction.
No, what are you talking about? Very little friction. This is look. I just explained it to you. It's like going through peanut butter, right? Do you understand what I'm saying here? Like, if you imagine trying to swim through a pool of peanut butter. Try it. Just go ahead and try to figure out how to do that.
What's your point?
That's the same comparison we're talking about here. It's the same kind of analogy that you would have. I mean, you're basically dealing with a very viscous fluid that it's going to take a very long time to get through if you don't have the right type of structure that's in place already for you to do that. That's why I'm not understanding where you're coming from. It seems like you're not very well read on this or something.
Aren't ants like strong, like 100 times stronger than their body weight?
Yes, but that's where first of all, that's on a macro level. Also, we're talking about stuff that's in the micro. I mean, like the molecular level here. That's again, we're talking about something that has to work very hard to get where it's going, right? But you're saying that somehow there's precursory proteins that were on the exterior of the cell lining that allowed them to somehow get around without the flagellum. But I don't see that. I really don't. It just doesn't make any sense based on the paperwork I've seen.
Well,
and honestly, I'd have to see your evidence for that.
Do you know how amoebas get around? They don't have flagella.
Okay.
No, I mean that's how they work. They extend their membrane in a certain direction and retract it from the opposite direction. They don't have cilia or flagella. So if a cell,
it's not that we're.
Go ahead.
We're not claiming. We're talking about what the science is. We're not the one scientists. We're talking about what scientists have observed in real life. That's why you keep getting mad at us when we're the ones of just relaying what the scientists have found.
No, see, that's the thing, though. I have not witnessed that myself, and that's the problem. I think that there's a big distinction here between what you guys are talking about and what I'm talking about. I like to go and verify my findings, right? I don't like to just listen to one source and then assume that I have it right. Now, the problem here is I think, and I could be misconstruing this, but I think that you guys are only looking at one source and thinking you have it down pat, and that's a problem.
Nope, I got it.
But just to clarify,
places where I go.
No, I mean there's thousands upon thousands of papers that just I have read, let alone that are out there. So it's not just a single source. But I think you're referencing, correct me if I'm wrong, the We're only going through the scientific method and not considering supernatural as an explanation. Is that kind of what you meant?
No, that's not what I meant at all. I'm talking about the potentials here. So if we're assuming amoebas can potentially turn into bacteria, right, or vice versa, however that would work. I mean, I'm not even sure which way you would look at that, because you would have to assume that one of them has to be the precursory, well, I don't want to say design structure. I want to say it's a biological system here. Which one of them, first of all, would be the potential first or precursory system? Would it be the amoeba or the bacterium?
Well, the leuca would be, but it would probably have locomotions more similar to an amoeba.
But right, we don't have leuca. That's the point. So you're saying that because we don't have leuca, we can't verify anything else but this before that, right?
What do you mean?
So if we can't see what leuca looked like, right, what it was capable of, and what its genome exactly looked like, basically my understanding would be that how can you possibly verify or know that there were precursory systems in the first place that weren't the exact same that you see today?
Well, if evolution happened, what we're saying is you can essentially
that's
see
a presupposition, though.
It's not.
Imagine that you're not thinking about it in terms of evolution.
It's not just a presupposition. You could argue, well, maybe.
What do you mean it's not just a presupposition?
We're not just waking up and
deciding
that evolution is true. It's.
Well, that based on your statement, you just made it true. You have to assume it's true for this to be a possibility, right?
But we've already done the work to show that premise is sound. So we're working off the premise.
No, that's not true.
Happened.
Look. I had a discussion with a PhD biologist that told me, and this is her best experiment that she was part of, that was supposed to be evidence for evolution in the macro sense here. Okay, she was involved in the Richard Lenski experiment with E. coli, where it became capable of digesting citrate. Okay, now, upon closer inspection, it turns out that it broke the genes that were already within the genome to allow for a gene that was already within the genome to be activated.
But that's how it works.
In place of that. But you don't get it, though. The point is, it was already in the genome. Don't you get that? There's a problem here.
Yeah, that's how all evolution works.
How did it get there in the first place? That's the question.
Genes just don't pop up out of nowhere. They have to be using existing genes.
The point I'm making is that it was already there from the beginning. Don't you see there's a problem with your explanation by saying that?
No, that's just the mechanism of how it works. You really don't get it, do you? You only get to change.
She admitted that this is a problem.
Isn't that one source though?
Dr. Ling specifically said, "Okay, I admit this is a problem. We don't know how this is possible. How would they think about it this way? E. coli is not known to live or to have a habitation in citrus at all, right? First of all, how would it have developed that at any point in time in history? At all. And then on top of that, you have to explain why it was just stagnant and latent there.
So God put it in there just so Lenski could look like it's evolving?
Look, the point is, some intelligent agent, I would say, designed it from the beginning to have the potential. Does that make sense? It makes a lot more sense than just assuming that it somehow came out of nowhere.
Well, no, that's exactly, don't assume that it came out of nowhere. That's not how evolution works.
Yes, you do. You just literally said that it... Oh, okay.
No, I said that that's precisely the opposite. It has to come from pre-existing genetic material. You're limited to the genes in the parent generation. You can only change them. You can't just add one.
Oh boy. Okay, but you're limited to the genes that are within the parent generation. What I just told you is that the parent generation already had the gene in their genome, right?
We don't know.
But they were never exposed to citrus before that. You understand?
That's how it works.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, the genes.
I just explained this to you.
Change,
this doctorate in biology just told us after the fact, after realizing, okay, this doesn't really work. Don't you get what I just said? She admitted that this is not what we're expecting. This is the opposite of what we're expecting. You should not expect to see structures that are already in the genome counted as evidence for a macro change. That's not how this works.
Well, I wasn't part of that conversation.
What if it had a different environment, though? In the past, but it had those things, and then it moved into another environment.
It can't be going over you guys' head like this. I don't know. Are you guys just dodging this?
I'm saying that slowly got to that point where
Okay, it has to be
slowly
exposed.
to get to another point, and then it still has those genes from the other point, and we're trying to introduce it to that.
What I'm trying to get across.
I think it's the same.
What I'm trying to get across is that it was never, at least to our knowledge, it has never been exposed to citrus before, right? But for some reason, after going through the full genome expression there, which by the way, they went all the way back like 30,000 generations to verify this. They already mapped up their genome back then. And they said, okay, this was actually already part of the original genome. But how is that possible? How is that possible if in the newest generation they were just recently exposed to this citrus where they were required, and they lost the ability for them to use their flagellum because they were in a machine that constantly rotates them in motion so that they can track their genome. So just think about that. I mean, this is something that's already in their genome. And she admitted, she's like, okay, look, I thought this was good evidence, I'm sorry, and she apologized about it. So this isn't some one-off situation. I mean, if that's the best evidence that's out there right now, you got to really consider what else is there.
You know, evolution doesn't always delete the genes. It can keep it for a long time.
I don't think it's going to delete anything. But the point is, you have to figure out how it got there in the first place, and it's never been shown to do this. It's never been shown to.
We know how things can change.
Okay.
We know how.
Okay.
DNA
Snake,
sequence.
you can say that. You can say that, but you've never shown it in a lab. That's the point I'm making. You can say up and down, we know how this has happened, but we never verified this. That's the problem. You need verification. You can't just say it and then hope that people are going to believe you.
Yeah, we verified that mutation happens. So
no, you have not.
We haven't verified mutation.
No, you have not. I guarantee you have not. You have not done this. In fact, if you think you have the evidence, go ahead and send me the link.
That
you can put it in the chat,
exist?
and I'll follow it. Yeah, well, that there are changes at the macro level that can produce novel features, right, or novel abilities that were never in the genome in the first place. That's the point I'm trying to get across with you.
Just like this experiment right here.
If you can track so many thousand generations, right, and you can say, okay, from this first generation all the way to this last one we just experienced, and made a change, then I will believe you. But if you can go through the entire genome and see that was something that was already in the genome, then you got literally nothing. You got nothing to back up yourself. Look, and that's a huge problem on your side.
Not all these bacteria didn't survive to the next toxicity plate. They keep on getting stronger. It's like 10 times stronger than the last, or something like that.
Well, that could be an adaptation that's already part of the genome, though. That's what I'm trying to get across to you. You don't seem to understand that these could be things that are already embedded in their genome.
The problem is they didn't all survive. That means there's not their previous.
That doesn't matter.
Mutation, and they keep on getting.
It's like if we were to go to the top of like Mount Everest, right, and we gain the ability for us to breathe at lower oxygen, lower oxygen in general, right? So if we can do that, but we can of course adjust ourselves to go back down to where we're at sea level and just intake more oxygen. It doesn't really matter. It's an adaptation that you adjust to, right? But if it's already in your genome to do that, right, to an extent, it won't be like a maximized ability. Now, if you're staying up in the Himalayas and you're just living there constantly, then your successive generations would, of course, gain the ability for you possibly to live even longer, like as a species in that particular region, right? But it's very
long
different.
Enough to repopulate, or
right. That's the whole point. So if mutations in this sense are real, they would have to still survive first and then pass on that information to the next generation, right? That's how my understanding of evolution is supposed to be.
That's natural selection.
Right, exactly. And so, and again, I'm not against you guys in the sense that I want to see the evidence. That's the problem. And I've looked at so many different things to try to verify this, but haven't come across any of it. That's why I want you to send me this information. Otherwise, I can't trust what's being said there. I'm sorry.
This is one of the experiments that we have for seeing that natural selection from the mutation right here. So these are just lines that we follow to the ones that survived to each.
Well, how many generations are involved first and foremost, and how did they verify that this wasn't already something that was there within the genome? That's the question. And what kind of novelty function did it provide?
It would have to already be in the genome. That's how it works.
See, that's your problem, though. If it's already in the genome, then you don't have a mechanism. Don't
through
you get
mutation.
that?
That's why it
No.
happens.
Listen, you're missing the point.
Hold on.
If
you change an existing gene, it can have a new function. That's how evolution works.
that's okay.
It's a population
So I think
thing.
you're missing. I think you misunderstand how it works. So imagine that you already have the ability for you to populate a leg, right, or an arm, right? So a human has the ability to do that, right? So if it takes the same portion of the genome that produces an arm or a leg and puts it in the wrong place, it can produce that arm or leg in the wrong place, in its expression, right? Or it could apply it more than once. That's where we get these different mutations that we see in people, where they have like an additional limb or something like that, just showing up. That's how that works. That's what we know to be true.
Yes,
Now, just because you see it more than once in the genome doesn't mean that it's a good or a bad thing there.
Right.
The point I'm trying to get across here is if you think that you have a new structure there, it could be something that's the exact same. It doesn't make a difference. If it's already there,
So
it's not going to cause anything to really be new.
So this is why the majority
That's a
of
macro.
life shares the same genes, is because it's just mostly the same stuff reorganized in different ways. So for your example, the gene to create bone already exists. It's just the shape in which the bones are put is what's changing, and that can create new structures, new body plans. And we actually, there's a species of fish where we see their fins. Individuals in that species have completely different fin designs, and they're functional.
But
So
mutations have been shown. Okay, go ahead.
Do you know how bones are synthesized, Snake?
Yeah. I mean, what part?
Yeah. How bone is synthesized? Do you know that? How?
What part? I mean, what are you getting at?
Bone. Structure of bone.
What part do you want me to speak about?
Calcium.
The calcium part, or the physical?
Osteogenesis, the origin and development of bones.
Yeah, that's a long and complicated process.
Yes, that's a very long, complicated process, and I can give you the list here.
But are we
arguing
against
which
the origins of
which are claimed to be necessary in order for you to have bones? That makes it an irreducibly complex process.
But we already know irreducibly complex processes can evolve. We've observed it.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, and I think Sal Cardona made a very, very good point here. And he said, I do not like the irreducible complex argument because basically it is applied to everything from the geological cycles to a subunit or protein in the cell. And it would be much better if the structures would be actually investigated one by one individually, and then it would be investigated if it is possible a specific structure actually to come by natural means, either evolution or whatever you want to suppose. And I think this is a good approach, because otherwise you can basically say, as it happened with me in my debate with Depperdino and then Cardinale, where they claimed, oh, we have these two systems, like the HIV system and the lizard, which evolved from egg legging. We can observe how it has transitioned to evolve a placenta. And therefore, the irreducible complexity claim has been falsified. And if you want, you have to reformulate the claim or the hypothesis. Well, the thing is that, first of all, their claim, they just made it, and I didn't have heard these two claims before, so I couldn't even argue against them. I had to look it up. But even let's suppose that they are right, that doesn't mean that you can extrapolate and use an inductive argument and generalize and say, oh, because these two systems have been demonstrated to evolve, then therefore irreducible complex, the argument has been refuted, falsified, and is not valid anymore.
Well,
and when they said that, I was thinking about so many different systems, biological systems, which I have listed, where we know that subunits by themselves cannot be repurposed. They have just one function, which is in the specific device that we know, and we don't know of any other purpose of these subparts, like as I mentioned previously in regards of the biosynthesis pathway of chlorophyll. There you have 7 enzymes, and I have checked that in the enzyme and protein data bank, and the only and unique purpose that they mention is in that pathway. So we have to work from that, and starting from that, you have to ask yourself, well, if we stop, let's suppose, at the 14th step, then you have an intermediate product which has no function. You have a structure which has no function in the organism, but actually it would be harmful and destroy the cell because it produces, as I said before, a reactive oxygen species which destroy the cell. And if you do not have the mechanisms to protect the cell from these species, then the cell dies.
Okay, so I want to track back a little bit. You were saying just because some irreducibly complex systems have been shown to evolve, that doesn't mean that there aren't some... Well, you started off on the right foot. That does not mean that there aren't some truly irreducibly complex systems, but it does prove that the claim that irreducibly complex systems cannot evolve is false. So
maybe in regards of specific systems which have been shown. But my point of interrogation is, can we, even if that is true, which I also question, but let's start from the premise that it is true that the 2 systems which have been mentioned by Dan Cardinale and Stepperdino, that they effectively have been shown to be a process of evolution. Okay, so does that mean that I have to generalize and use an inductive argument and say, well, since these 2 systems have been shown to be the product of evolution, then everything else also can be explained in the same way? Well, the thing was that irreducible complexity, I just finished, is I don't apply it only to systems which are complex like multicellular organisms or systems which we see like photosynthesis or the chlorophyll biosynthesis pathway, but I applied also to the cell, which we know that it cannot be the product of evolution, but it requires a minimal number of parts in order for the cell being able to have all the functions which it requires for self-replication and starting actually to adapt and to evolve.
The problem is that you just can't tell the difference, because you're right, we shouldn't be able to say just because we know of one instance where it can happen, therefore that's what happened in all instances. But the problem is we can't tell just based on the structure itself whether it was intelligently designed irreducibly complex or whether it evolved irreducible complexity.
Okay, so my contention, just wanted to be clear on this, is that if you're going to try to say that irreducible complexity is not a real thing, and you've been able to falsify it through a few different mediums there, the question would be, if we were to have a literal situation where there was intelligent design involved in the creation of biological structures, what would you expect to see? And not to mention that we also need to anticipate that if even just one structure is shown to be irreducibly complex, then we've already proven that that's the case, right? I'm just saying you have to go through all these different mediums just to figure out the case, and the only thing that really backs you up is like basically an argument from incredulity, right? So I'm kind of worried about that's what we're focused on.
I don't know how you can show from the structure of it itself that it is truly intelligently irreducibly complex.
Have you looked at any more of Behe's work aside from the flagellum issue?
I mean, I might have. I don't.
I can
So
give you
he goes
many
over.
examples. I can give many examples, and
Yes,
the one which I am studying right now is the ribosome, and the ribosome is probably the most complex molecular machine known in biology.
But we know of simpler versions of it.
Okay, so take the most simple version, Snake, and there was a dialogue between Church and Craig Venter, and they actually even mentioned this and said, well, if we go below 53 proteins and 3 ribosomal RNAs, then we have seen that it is not functional anymore. So there is a threshold where you do not have any function anymore with the ribosome. And the thing is, and this is the crux of the issue here, what good is a tRNA for without if it is not involved in the translation process, or other subparts which are involved, like the amino acid tRNA synthetases, or let's say the subunits of the ribosome. And worse than that, how about the biogenesis involved assembly factors, which are just used in order to help in the assembly of the ribosome? They do not have any other function besides that to be involved in the maturation of the ribosome. What good would in a prebiotic earth be a small nucleolar RNA which is helping to make proteins, which by themselves help to make the subunits of the ribosome?
But RNA does have a function. It has catalytic functions on its own, and that's
yes,
where simple ribozymes come
yes,
from.
but the thing is that you need a complex, very specific structure which bears function in the assembly of the ribosome. And there are many assembly factors. We know that, for example, when the ribosome makes one subunit of a ribosome and it comes out of the ribosome, if it would not be fixed by chaperones, it would immediately start to fold. And if it would be folding in the wrong compartment, then not in the assembly side of the greater assembly of the ribosome itself, then it would be non-functional. And it is absolutely necessary that chaperones, and there are some subunits which require 150 chaperones and assembly factors just to transport the subunit of the ribosome to another compartment. And if that is not there, then you cannot assemble a functional ribosome. And all that you have to explain the origin of that without evolution, because the ribosome had to emerge prior when life started.
But you keep saying you can't explain this, you can't explain that. Well, science is never going to be able to explain everything. Back a few hundred years ago, you would be saying you can't explain how to fly or how electricity works. So that is if you're concluding God from that, that's where the problem comes from. Because the problem is we can't study non-natural causes to this kind of complexity. Some of them we have been able to show that they come from natural processes. Others we just don't know yet, or it is supernatural, but we just don't have a way of testing it. And that's one of the problems with concluding that God did it, is because it can fit any data, and it only fits in the gaps of our scientific knowledge.
Well,
okay, well, I mean, so you're basically saying that because we ask questions that we can't infer that God is a possibility? I don't understand.
I'm saying it's not a logical inference, or it's not not
why
testable.
should natural mechanisms be a more plausible or more logical inference, in special when we can actually make an analogy to what we see we are doing? And I entered in the just a moment, please.
I'm saying that we can't study it. That's about it. Like, there's not much else to say about it. I'm not even willing to go as far as to say that it's not possible. I'm just saying there's no way to study it.
Well, the thing is, what we have to do is like we have to stick to the best explanation, and I asked that in a stream a couple of days ago in the after show at David Neff's channel of Jordan's debate with Kent Holwind, and I will make that argument again because it is really, in my understanding, what I am saying now is really amazing and amazing evidence actually of design. So let's suppose that you require to make a very complex machine which is made of many several subparts which have to interact together. And you have machines which produce these subparts, and once they are made, you have to make a test drive to see if they are functional. And you make the test drive, and then you either see that the function is guaranteed, and then you can put these parts aside and then use them in the higher assembly process of the whole machine. Or when you see that it is malfunctioning, then you have mechanisms actually to discard that subproduct. Now, in order for you to actually make that distinction if a subpart is functional or not, you need foreknowledge in regards to know what the function is, and if the structure is correct, if it is the right structure, and if it will interact correctly in the higher assembly afterwards in the higher machine. So you have to ask yourself, do you think that foreknowledge or that process of making a test drive, is that best explained by the action of an intelligent designer, or would you say that random non-intelligent mechanisms without foresight could come up with such a process of error check and repair?
Well, if it's an unfalsifiable explanation, it's not an explanation at all, so it can't be the best explanation.
Well, the thing is that, as I said previously, things that happened in the past eventually cannot be tested, and you cannot reproduce events that happened only one time. And the origin of life is such a fact.
Yeah. So we're trying.
What we can do is a thought experiment and make analogies to what we know that intelligence can instantiate, which non-intelligent mechanisms cannot instantiate.
Yeah. So we know of intelligent processes that can create this kind of complexity, and we know of non-intelligent processes that can create this kind of complexity. And so
we know that. Have you an example? Do you have an example?
What we have?
Do you have an example?
We've been giving examples this whole time, but
all life.
Yeah, but the problem is that we can't distinguish between the two without some kind of background knowledge of how the process of it got there. And so with abiogenesis research, we're trying to learn more about the background knowledge of fundamental, simple abiotic chemistry, so that if we understand the background knowledge of that so well that we can create life with it, well, then that is a good explanation. So, but you can't go any further with the God explanation.
Just aside for a minute. Let's abiogenesis just be aside in a minute. And I mean, you do not know anything about abiogenesis, neither do I. But I know by experience, since I'm a machine designer, and you can know this too, that a process of testing and error checking a part, a subunit, which afterwards has to have a specific function in a machine, that process has to be designed. It is purposeful.
Well, no, actually, that's one of the things nature does really well, is to have lots of different conformations and test them.
I don't understand where you're
disregard all the failed things.
I want to know from you, Snake, in regards of human-made machines. Do you know a process which does not require intelligence, then that can set up an error check and repair mechanism of a subunit of a complex machine?
Well, they're human-made, so The
Yes.
only
No,
the
but
only
he's
way
getting across
technically
that this is a
That's
good
that's
comparison to actual biological systems because they do have checks
we are
and
going
balances
there.
within their
Yes, we
systems.
so
will come there. The thing is not if it is human made. The thing is that intelligence is involved in producing such a system of error checking
but
and repair because intelligence has foresight and has purpose and goals. If I have
yes,
the goal to make
that's
a machine which
I
functions
know.
properly, and I know that subunits they have to be made properly in order to function in that higher complex system, and then I know, oh, I have to test that subunit. If it is working properly, then I will incorporate it in the higher system. And if it is not working well, then I will discard it and I will produce another one. And when that one is working properly, then I incorporate it in the highly complex machine. And my question again is, do you think that non-intelligent mechanisms would have the capability to produce such an error check and repair mechanism?
Yes, but the other things you were talking about, we
Do you
know
have an
happen
example?
in intelligent design
Do
because
you
we
have
have the background
well?
knowledge
Do you
of
have
humans
an
designing
example?
things.
The
Do
ones
you
that
have an
survive
An
and
example?
example
reproducing.
of
That's the
discarding
example.
an
Sorry?
example of discarding the subunits
Yeah.
that
Do you
don't work.
have an example where non-intelligent mechanisms have produced an error check and repair system to check if subunits of a highly complex machine are properly made or not?
Yeah, it's called natural selection.
No, that's nothing to do with things in nature. I mean, I want to know. Okay,
There are literally
natural
things
selection.
called compensatory mutations, which are
Listen,
repairing subunits, and those get tested and discarded or kept by nature and natural
how
selection.
do you know that non-intelligent mechanisms have brought forward these systems?
We can observe those kinds of compensatory mutations in organisms. We can
No,
observe those
no, no,
same
no.
processes in computer programs as well.
I just explained this to you a little while ago. You do not have verified evidence that shows that this is possible. You need to stop. You need to stop going back to that. Unless you can show me an actual, you know, peer-reviewed, whatever you want to call it, you know, evidence paper that says this is what's happened based on this exact study over this course of amount of time with this many generations of whatever,
Yeah, if
and it
you
shows that there was novel functionality that was implanted or changed into the genome that did not already pre-exist, you are wrong. Period.
if you email me, I can send you like tons of peer-reviewed stuff. So I'll give you my email, but
Peer review doesn't mean anything because
For the record,
I know
I don't
plenty
think it
of
matters.
peer-reviewed papers which at the end come to the conclusion that evolution did it without a warrant at all because it is just an inference without basis and without actually observation.
the peer review is just saying other people who are experts have looked at it. It does
Yeah.
need to contain some kind
So
of
we
demonstrable
know what the peer review
process
is,
within.
but they don't allow.
So I'll send you those. They have demonstrable experimental results.
So let me ask you something. Has nature, non-intelligent nature, foresight?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. Okay.
That's the
order
difference.
for
But
you-
you have to have background
Okay.
knowledge of that process to tell whether it has foresight or not. No, you can't tell foresight just from the structure of things. So technically, although the chances are very very small, you could get a hurricane that puts together a Lego set in the way that the directions are telling you to, and both natural processes and foresight can put them together in the same sequence.
So there's always a chance that things can happen.
Yeah, so you can't. So
with
the point of
specific
that,
parameters, but you're wrong in the sense that you're saying that it's going to happen when there's no evidence of that. There's a difference between it's going to happen and it might potentially happen, right?
the point
So
of saying
there's-
that is that you can't tell just from the structure whether it had foresight or not. You have to have background knowledge of the process, whether it had foresight or not. Do you understand what I'm saying? The process of assembly
Yeah,
is more
absolutely,
important
but-
than the structure, the end structure. to have knowledge about.
Here's the thing though. Like, so if you're assuming abiogenesis occurred, there is no reason for these prebiotic chemicals to move toward life at all. So that's another problem here, is that you're assuming that this is going to be moving toward that.
Let's suppose, Snake, that you would have. Let's suppose that you would have an entirely fully set up biogenesis process to make a fully functional ribosome. Okay, somehow by any natural mechanism which doesn't involve intelligence, produced that feed, and that ribosome. Let's take the smallest one, the minimal one, which bears function. Okay, so if you have it and you have all parts, but you do not have the set of tRNAs, which is the translation molecule, the adapter molecule, then you cannot have translation.
Then it wouldn't survive.
Yeah, if you just
That's
take
my point. That's why I'm saying that the ribosome requires many parts, which all have to be together, fully set up, in order for you to have actually translation. And you need lots of information, and you need lots. There are 13 different error check and repair mechanisms inbuilt in the ribosome, in the tRNA, in the synthetases, in order to have sufficient accuracy in the synthesis of proteins. Otherwise, the errors will be too great, and you will not be able to have functional proteins. But the thing is that you need everything together. That is a prime example of irreducible complexity, where you cannot move below a certain threshold, and if you go below, then you have no functionality.
But that fact alone...
Talking about modern life, though.
That fact alone does not point to intelligent design.
Why not?
Because we know of ways that things like that can happen without purpose or forethought.
How?
Yeah, I would like to hear that.
We've already discussed that. I feel like we're going in circles right now. Could we go back a little bit to why you think...
But there wasn't even that... Natural selection wasn't even there yet, because you require ribosome for life to start.
Yeah, so
you have no evolution or natural selection as a possible explanation.
Can we go back to the point of what's a better explanation, a natural process or a mental process?
Well, I think we are just right now.
I mean, we could just literally use Occam's razor right now and just say, obviously, intelligent design would have to happen because it's the better alternative of both of these choices. But I mean, if you don't want to accept that, that's fine. Nobody's just going to force you to accept it.
Well, the reason I came on today is to discuss that that's not even an explanation at all, because it fits all data sets. It has no specific predictions. And I wanted,
complex.
Yeah, it's way more.
Have any specific predictions?
It uses.
I mean, we've actually come to many different conclusions just because we understand that there is intelligent design in nature.
And
in fact, we are starting to use we're just now realizing very recently, that there are biological systems that are so efficient, so amazingly crafted. They've far exceeded all of our expectations and our capabilities to make such design structures. So we're even using the same structures in our potentials right now, so that we can develop things like the lobster eye ray gun. It uses like an X-ray. It uses the same structure of the lobster eye that's already in nature, right? To attempt to use for X-ray purposes, right?
Yeah, and
I mean, this is like you can go find it on a government agency website right now. They have camouflage that comes from like the what was it called? The chromosome. I remember what the name of this is. There are cellular structures on the surface of the epidermis of the octopus and cuttlefish. I forget what they're called, but they can basically shapeshift, and they can like alter their color, things like that. So there are government agencies that are trying to use that to make like like cloaking outfits and things like that. I mean, just think about this. You're saying that natural processes created something that's more efficient, more amazing than what we can even potentially conceive.
We do that to create
and
really
we're intelligent
advanced
agents. Does that not make any sense to you? Like, it doesn't.
We do that to create really advanced AIs. We can't design them. We have to let natural processes do that. But Top Dog made a good point, which is that God is perhaps the most complex explanation. Because there's nothing more complex.
So if it's as simple as did it,
there's nothing more complex.
Then that would be Occam's razor, period.
From my understanding, there's nothing more complex than a thing that can do anything and knows everything.
Just because you can't explain what God is or how he operates does not mean that he is extremely complex in whatever he chooses to do to make something. Now, what we see as complex in nature, yes, can be considered that, but as far as him doing it, doesn't have to be complex. That's the problem. You're trying to extrapolate something conflate something entirely different to make your argument.
And here's the other problem: is there a mechanism?
Did you get your information from real life? That's the problem. Did you get your intelligent designer or God from real life?
Well, we do not propose that God is made of physical parts. As a mind, he is not complex. He can conceive complex things, but as a being, a mind is not made of complex parts.
So how can he be as complex as how can he conceive of things as complex as life and not be more complex than that? Because he would have to have at least the same amount of complexity in order to simulate it in his understanding, right?
Because I am a dualist and I believe that my mind is in substance different than my brain.
Yeah.
And
so you think mind is fundamental.
Singular. Yes, I think
primary.
Mind is fundamental.
So you said something like every machine that we know of is intelligently designed, so it's okay to infer the machines of cells are intelligently designed. So I would like to ask, how come, since every mind that we know of is made of matter, how can you infer the opposite, that there are minds that aren't made of matter? Shouldn't we have to infer that other minds have to be made of matter?
I don't say that minds are made of matter. I say that the mind
but using your argument,
interacting with the brain.
Using your argument, we should conclude that. Because all minds that we know of are made of matter.
Oh, it's not minds
that's
that are made
not
of
true.
Matter.
That's not true.
Again, exactly.
No.
It's a collective of...
there are neurosurgeons and neuroscience personnel that have gone over studies regarding the mind and its differences between our brain. They actually were showing that there's the
mind is an emergent property of the brain.
Yeah. No. See, there's a difference. So you're taking it completely different. I don't think you've seen the studies I'm talking about here.
That's the state of...
I don't think you'd be saying that if that were the case.
That's the state of neuroscience.
There's more than the brain, too. Yeah, it's more than the brain. You have a spinal cord, and you have gut bacteria, and nervous system, and all that.
Well, so they were focusing on providing... Okay, so they asked these individuals, I think it was like 100 different individuals, to perform actions, right? And so they were getting brain activity per action that was being performed. And then they immediately asked them to do the opposite of that action whenever they were asked to do it. So basically they would say, go ahead and do this. And then immediately whenever they go to do that, they would say, don't do it, right? And so they would check the brain scans for that. And there would be no brain activity at all, not even like a hint of it, which shows that it's not primary in the matter. There must be something else that's outside of the matter that's manipulating it to cause it to do these
Or
things.
we can't measure every process in the brain.
Okay, you can say that if you want to, but you have to show me the evidence for that.
You have to show the evidence of what you just talked about first.
Right, I'm going to send you the studies, but again, I'm just letting you know that's an actual study that's been conducted.
I heard about it and stuff, but
that's
could be misunderstood.
Yeah, that's assuming that we can measure and scan every process that's going on in the brain.
Okay, so if you want to assume that we are expected to see brain activity from the very second that something is initiated, and sometimes things can take a little bit longer for you to do, but that to me just makes the point even stronger, right? If it take even longer, that means there's something has to be primary outside of the brain that would be able to manipulate the brain to send forth those signals.
Or we're just not able to measure.
Why do we have to learn anything? What's the point of learning? What is learning for if we can just know it already?
That's like, what's the point of asking questions? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's assuming that there aren't things that we can't measure in the brain. The scan may not be picking up something that's happening in the brain prior to the thing that's happening that we can scan. You understand what I'm saying?
Can our neurons be like how?
Sorry, I'm also dealing with my family over here.
We may not be able to measure
like
what's
programs.
actually happening. For the first
I can quote here Paul Davies. He says in From Matter to Life, our phenomenal experiences are the only aspect of consciousness that cannot, even in principle, be reduced to known physical principles. This is the hard problem of consciousness. Consciousness is an irreducible fundamental property of the mind with its own laws and principles.
That's the quality of subjective experience.
Oh yeah, and you guys do a lot of just small amount of people that say this, but what about the large majority of all the people that say otherwise too? You're only looking at the small amount, like one source or something sometimes, that say what you want to hear. You don't want to hear the actual majority.
Yeah, neuroscience
there's
is
different
not
perspectives on that. I mean,
neuroscientists do not
one thing I've
conclude
seen,
that there are souls from any of this, even from the hard problem of consciousness.
Okay, that's because they're going based on physical evidence, right? Obviously, they can only go so far with that. Why would they ever assume that there's a soul when they can't see a soul? That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
But that's the problem.
We
You can
know
make
that soul means
inferences from
emotion.
the evidence, though.
So why should we assume that if we can't test it?
Well, considering that there's actually, like, throughout all of history, there's been a spiritual nature to almost every single culture on the planet. I would say that there's a pretty good evidence based on that alone that there's likely something outside of our physical existence.
Is there a spiritual nature of the animals?
I mean, you have to ask the Native Americans about that, but just want to clarify, I mean, as far as we can tell, just from that alone, you can at least infer that it's possible there could be a spiritual realm or some other realm that's outside of our physical nature that we cannot comprehend or understand right now.
Well, spiritual just means personality, really.
Well, I could grant that.
I mean, like a different dimension. Does that make sense? I'm not saying like in the sense that, like you have emotions. I mean, there is a higher, maybe even like a potentially higher cognitive functionality that's required for us to even perceive these things. Possibly, I don't even know. I'm just saying that's the potential here.
I think
but if you're looking at history.
I think it's guaranteed that there are fundamental aspects of reality that we don't even have the first inkling of. But the problem is, how are we supposed to claim to have knowledge or talk about these things if we can't test them?
Well, see, that's okay, true. But the thing is,
philosophy.
Okay, so if I had to give you my evidence of, because I've had a personal experience that was actually very eye-opening for me, and that's one of the reasons I used to be an agnostic for a very long time. I actually went through my full naval career, all of my high school, as an agnostic, leaning towards atheism. I mean, there's a lot of things that I was stuck in, and I mean, I probably would still to this day be an agnostic if it weren't not for this event. But just to clarify, I personally believe that there is a spiritual realm and that there are entities and things that we cannot see or perceive, at least not in this physical realm. That to me is just a simple fact of nature now. Now, I understand that you guys haven't experienced what I've gone through, but I mean, that's just something that I'm just going to put out there for right now.
I know, you can have your own experiences and stuff. Doesn't mean
no, it's not just me though. There was also my wife there, and she was actually the one that was affected the most by this. And so we both came from entirely different backgrounds. We both had the paradigm shift, and both became Christians at the exact same time from the event because of what happened and how it did happen. So I mean, there's a lot more nuance to what I was saying. What's that?
Can you in short terms say what happened?
Yeah, I mean, it was a demon possession situation. My wife is the one that was possessed. She's very kind of worried about how people are going to perceive this. But I mean, I can give you the testimony video because we both made the video a little less than a half a year ago. And I'll just put it in the chat here if you all want to look it up. But,
sure.
We already know that demon possessions actually are just mental problems that people have.
Okay, I mean, if you want to go that route, that's fine. I mean,
there's no way to
for the record, that's
differentiate.
actually the exact reason why she didn't want to talk about it. But just to clarify, there's been no history of her having any sort of psychosis.
It don't have to.
Not even, okay, sure, you can say that if you want to, but I've looked at studies talking about multiple personality disorder. Those things usually manifest very, very early. We're talking like 10 years old.
Keyword user.
She was already 23 years old when this happened, so I don't see where you're getting that information from. But anyways, moving on.
Go
How can you
haywire
be,
at random too sometimes.
What's
They
that?
glitch. Your brain can go glitch sometimes.
No,
You
you have no idea what you're talking about. This is listen. Unless you actually know what happened there, you're not going to have anything to say about this conversation. I mean, this situation.
I had experiences of my own too. I've seen stuff, so it's not like I don't have any experience. So.
Well, if that's the case, then why would you be disagreeing with me that it's potentially that there is a real spiritual realm? Unless you just think that all things that happen that are outside of our perception is always something that's wrong with us.
Because you're claiming it's a demon when it's just your mind.
I know that I wasn't talking to my wife. Let's put it that way. I knew that for a fact, and I knew that she was looking at my daughter with evil intent, and there was a few other things that were happening that just gave me the inference, the conclusion that this was happening. And then at the end of it, she freaked out when I said I was going to pray over her in the name of Jesus, which, by the way, I was already a skeptic. I didn't even believe that Jesus was real. But I ended up doing it anyways, and she freaked out, and I put my hand on her shoulder. She scratched me, trying to grab my arm. I have a scar from it. I mean, this is nothing like her. This is completely out of character for her. Entirely out of character for her. But why? Think about it this way. She's never laid her hand on the Bible. There's so much nuance to this. I can't even go through all of it right now. But she's from a spiritual background. She's a half Hopi and Navajo Indian, and her practices, she would put like ashes around the house. She would pray to her ancestors, things like that. I'm from a Methodist background, and I became an agnostic, leaning towards atheism for almost 13 years. I had no reason to believe any of this stuff, but I remembered some of the stuff that I did know about from back when I was a child. That's the only reason why I got this inference in the first place. She doesn't even know what a demon was at the time. But the closest thing that she had in relevance to this would be like a, what they call a skinwalker. I don't know if you ever heard of those, but I mean, it's supposed to be like evil people that make these spiritual pacts that they can manipulate and shapeshift, basically. They can turn into like animals and stuff like that. That's supposedly what's supposed to happen. I don't know. But anyways, moving on. I'm not trying to get into this crazy, conspiracy theory. I'm just going, what did happen in our situation. And I mean, she was saying very erratic things. Very erratic things compared to someone that doesn't have any knowledge of the Bible. That's really strange. But why would she be saying, verses out of context or saying, there's a lot more to this. Okay, you're just taking it from your snapshot opinion without even knowing what the situation is.
I've seen lots of things, and I figured it out. So, and you were saying that the spiritual animal thing, changing into animals. Look, we're snake and wolf.
What's that? Oh,
we're a snake and wolf.
Hey, that's interesting, man. I mean, so the thing is, like, I'm not against you guys. I just want you guys to know that there's more nuance to this situation, and I think that we don't have the answers at our fingertips because we can't delve into those realms.
Yeah,
but at the same time, that doesn't mean we can't infer them. That's the problem.
I have these.
I used to believe that stuff too.
Yeah, I have these conversations with my girlfriend, who is also an atheist, but she believes that there are ghosts and stuff, or could be ghosts, because she's had like these paranormal experiences that she insists are some kind of ghostly, and other people have witnessed it in the room. But
there could be actors too, but they could have mental problems. We don't know.
Yeah.
That's the thing, though. We're not supposed to be assuming that they actually have mental problems. In fact, if that's the case, we might as well just assume that all persons' testimonies don't count for anything. And then why are we listening to scientists in the first place if that's the case?
So if you think that there's something... I can't really hear you.
Yeah, I remember seeing this video. Yeah. That was like a while back.
I just seen it. Yeah.
I mean, I did a lot of research after this happened just to see what kind of testimonies people did have regarding this stuff. But
so
I've heard people like entirely breaking their vertebrae whenever they were like contorted and things like that. There's all kinds of stuff that's out there that's like pretty hard evidence that there's more to this.
Well, he's not doing anything that's not physically.
I mean, this guy was shot in the head.
Is he flying?
If he would not be possessed, he would not be talking and walking like this. He would just waiting to be attended in the hospital.
Yeah, usually if there's like an actual mental problem, people don't just go into like erratic, motions unless like you're epileptic or something like that. But even then,
you ever seen drugs use? People that use
right,
drugs?
but
There's alternative explanations. If someone
Okay,
feels really weird and off, and they think that there is some kind of supernatural cause, that this may cause them to go deeper into that thought process. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I've heard of cases where people have taken drugs and they actually came out demon possessed. In other words, they came off their high and then they were demon possessed. Does that make sense? There's a lot of different things that are, again, there's more nuance than all of this.
Yeah, I just
We're
don't
just
know how
not
to.
seeing the big
I don't know
picture
how to test it.
with just the minor
And
clips.
I can grant you that there could be some kind of realm. And personally, I can say I would
Mhm.
prefer that there's some kind of spiritual realm. I just need some kind of testability to it, or else
Like confirmation.
Or else I'm just.
I understand.
It's just pure
That's
speculation.
the way it was for me, man. Snake, I'm right there with you. I was just like you as far as that particular perspective goes. Like that was me like 4 years ago almost. And I mean, like I say, if it weren't for this event, I would still be an agnostic. The way it was going down, it shook me that much. And again, it brought both of us to Jesus immediately after what happened. Because I mean, she ended up immediately passing out after I said, in the name of Jesus, over the prayer, and she woke up, was sobbing, says that she could not, she could hear and see everything, but she could not do anything about what was happening. I mean, to her, it was like she was in like a prison inside of her body. She couldn't do anything.
That's neurons. How they could do it too.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a lot more to this, but I mean, if you want to chalk it up to just supposed mental illness, that's your problem. I would say that's actually a presupposition.
Well, and I would love to see.
I'm talking about top dog.
I would
here.
love to see some systematic studying of this kind of stuff, and I'm sure there probably is. I haven't looked that much into it, but yeah, I think that would be really interesting areas of study.
And can't there be like deficiencies like in your brain?
I mean, you can give them your side. Sorry, she's right here listening. By the way.
Can there be like if you didn't eat the right food or something, you can have like something go on in the chemically in your brain too?
That wouldn't explain some of the things that were said, though. There's a lot. Again, there's nuance to this. If she's talking about the Bible, saying things that she shouldn't know, first of all, let alone in detail, right? That doesn't make any sense. You're basically saying that she has psychic abilities without having the potential of being a psychic. That doesn't make any sense.
How do you know that she didn't have it been said to her and she just like a savant or something going to that part of their mind?
I mean, so the only potential I've ever heard of that made any sense in that sense was that she went to a Mormon church. And sorry, my son's over here. But here's some. Again, like Mormons don't even usually talk from the Bible. They talk from the Book of Mormon, which is entirely different scripture. So I don't know how much you know about that, but again, we're not talking about the same subjects here. I think that you're just trying to throw out anything you can to try to get rid of this potential. And that's fine. If you really want to be the case, then
what's most likely?
No, I mean, okay, sure, it's most likely. Okay, that's fine.
There's plenty of other religions that could have been other people's interpretations.
No, it couldn't have, because if I had said the name Jesus instead of Brahma, right? If I said Brahma,
anything.
No, see, that's what I'm getting at. You're completely
intent,
dodging the point. The point was, I said the name Jesus, knowing the stories about what happened whenever he had cleansed people of demons.
Well,
and that's what happened. Guess what? She was cleansed literally
so
immediately from a demon.
Would you change your mind if you've heard someone who invoked Krishna or Allah and the demon went away?
So no, that's the thing. Like, I've actually looked a lot into these things, and second of all, the potentials that I've heard of in all those cases, we were never verified, and so they don't have like two-person witnesses. They'd only have like one person that was involved. So no, you can't say that these are actual potentials. In this case, I have a two-person testimony. It's not like I just have one person there. I also had all of her family that was able to verify that she never had any prior illness, mental illness or anything like that up to this point.
So if a similar...
the closest thing that would have been involved would have been postpartum depression because she had her second child there at that time.
So if a similar thing happened in a different religion, would that change your mind?
No, it wouldn't, because, again, you would have to show that to me like in front of my face. Like I said, I had to see
I'm
this
just saying
in
if.
person just for this to be a potential for me. So I mean,
With
unless I'm there witnessing it, then I can't come to that conclusion. But even if that were the case, there's also, I don't know how much you know about the Bible, but it also says that there will be lying signs and wonders, you know, for those that are coming.
Yeah, and it could be could be just your intent. Like there could be just some vague God out there or some spirit out there who's like, oh, this person's invoking some good spirit that they believe in. I'm going to help them out. You know.
Well, okay.
Or it could have been the individual person being triggered by certain words too.
If that is the case, though, why would you not believe in him then? I don't understand. Like it's.
It just could be.
So
a
why
lot
are you
of
not an agnostic? Why are you not an agnostic instead of an atheist? If that's the case, I don't understand.
Well,
that's not okay. That's not rational.
I might technically be.
It's not rational to invoke religion stuff into.
No. Okay. First of all, if I had to be honest, atheism in and of itself is actually irrational. Okay, because you're making a knowledge claim to something that you can't possibly know.
It's the lack.
That's
of,
why I was
belief.
whenever I was an agnostic leaning towards atheism and not an actual atheist, because I knew that if I went full-blown atheist, I'd be a crazy person. I'd be a person that's claiming to have knowledge that I don't have.
I call myself an atheist. I think might be more agnostic, but to me the difference is pretty much negligible, because unless we can test it, I don't care. Like I think it would be cool. Like I like fiction and stuff like that, but without the ability to confirm it, it's like I'm not even gonna waste brain space speculating. So I kind of just default to, well, we don't have any confirmed supernatural, so I'm living in a world of.
Well, see, that's the thing. For me, it was a confirmed supernatural. That's what I'm trying to get across. Yeah. And again, you guys don't have to believe me, and I completely understand if you don't. But that's why I'm giving you the testimony video so you can take a look at what she has to say. I mean, she's right here too if you want to talk to her. But well, actually, I mean, the whole situation.
I need to start heading out, but.
Okay, man. Sorry about that.
It's okay. But if you guys, if there's some last questions or comments, I can stick around for a couple more minutes. But here, did I give you my email yet?
No, I put mine in the chat there. If you want to just send me some of those links, man.
Oh yeah, okay.
Also,
yeah, I'll
the testimony is you just have to put that in the YouTube search, because for some reason I have to put like the literal whole thing for it to even show up. I don't know what's going on, but
Alrighty.
Yeah, I do appreciate the conversation, man.
Yeah, man. All right, well, and thanks, Otangelo and Top Dog.
You're welcome.
For coming.
Okay, see you next
All
time.
Right, bye, guys.